So at the end of June, I'm going on a week-long reading retreat, which I am super excited about. I'm going to have 7 whole days in a really lovely place in Lincolnshire, and all I'm going to do is read books, and it's going to be amazing. So as you may know from watching my other videos, I am doing the Reddit Fantasy Bingo Challenge, and so I decided I was going to build a TBR for this week-long reading retreat to fill as many of the bingo squares as I can in a week. Have to remind myself, it's not a competition. Always get into competitive mode on reading retreats. How many pages can I get read before lunch? How many books can I finish in the time? I am not setting myself a specific number of books, but I have built my TBR out of the ones that I've selected for the bingo challenge, and we're just going to see how it goes. And now I am going to pick the first few books that I'm going to read on the retreat, because I always like to have a new book to start on the train on the way. So that's what I'm going to do now. So I unfortunately can't take Stanley with me because he's very difficult to carry on public transport, and I would have to buy him his own train ticket because he'd need a separate seat on the train. But Snoozy the Sloth and Bear are coming with me, and they're going to help me pick the first couple of books. And here is the pile that I have put together. 14 books in this pile. It's 25 bingo squares, but I have completed 7 already. 3 I have assigned to audiobooks in my audiobook library, and 1 is being completed in my June TBR. So I have 14 books left to read for the challenge, and I am not trying to finish them all during the reading retreat. Definitely not going to happen. But I thought I always like to have some variety and some choice. So to decide which ones I'm going to put in my small bag rather than my main suitcase, so that I've got options to read on the train, I'm going to roll some dice, or rather Bear is going to pick the books. So it's all going to be Bear's fault, because there's some in here that I want to read more than others. So Bear's going to pick the books by rolling the dice. And I think I've worked out that for 14, if I roll 2d6 and a d4 and take 2 off the total, that should give me a randomly selected number from 1 to 14. So we'll see how it goes. Okay, Bear, are you ready? Oh, so okay, so we've got 4, 4, and 2. So 10 minus 2 is 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so the first one out of the pile is The Space Between Worlds by Micaiah Johnson. Don't know if that's pronounced correctly, but Micaiah Johnson, The Space Between Worlds. Now, I think this is fulfilling the bingo square for a book that is split into parts, multiple parts. So that's what that one is looking for. I don't really know anything about this, so that'll be interesting. Okay, I'm going to stick, I've only got 13 now, but I'm going to stick with the dice we've got just to make life easier. Okay, second pick from Bear. So we've got 11, 12, 13. So minus 2 is 11. So we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and the Space Between Worlds was 8. So that's 9, 10, 11. Okay. Just missed the chonker. So this is the Mimicking of Known Successes by Malka Alder. Dave actually read this recently on a reading retreat we went on together earlier in the year, and he didn't like it, but I'm quite intrigued. I know it's a sapphic romance, set in space, and I think there might actually be a murder mystery as well. So nice and short novella. So that's quite a good pick for the train journey. I think my camera is slowly sliding. Let's try and get back up to the top. And yes, you may have noticed, I am planning on reading my own book. The Defiant Spark by me, Annie Persick, is on the list. I am planning on reading my own book. So that'll be fun. Okay. Oh, this is going wrong. Last throw bear. We've got 2 sci-fi so far. It's half sci-fi, half not in this pile. Just do it one-handed so I can hold the phone. Here we go. So that's 5, 6, 7, 8. Minus 2 is 7. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So that's another sci-fi. Lots of sci-fi. So this is Sleeping Giants by Sylvain Neuvel. And this was the bingo square for something which is mixed media or epistolary. And I know this has letters and other mixed media in it. So that's Sleeping Giants by Sylvain Neuvel. So that gives me 3 very interesting books to pick from on the train. So now I know which books to pack in my main suitcase and which ones to pack for the train. Thanks, Bear. We have a terrible state of affairs. 5 of the tea drawers are empty. Oh, can't be countenanced. But luckily, I have been saving up and I have rewarded myself with more tea. Gone back to cupoftea.co.uk for some of my favourite flavours and some new ones that they have brought out. So I have a green exotic mango dream, green melon pineapple, big oolong, which has been a long time favourite. I haven't had it in a very long time. Peach oolong and rooibos date vanilla, which I'm excited about. But I'm not going to add them into the tea drawers now because I'm going to take them away with me on retreat so I can enjoy them whilst reading all of the books while I'm away. Hurrah! New tea! Okay, Bear, it's time to pick some more books. I've taken out these two because on one of the days in the retreat I have more time to read than the others. So I'm going to do the Herkyard 24-hour readathon, and I've picked these two books plus one ebook to try and complete in one day. So they are not in rotation. So I have 8 left to choose from. So what's it going to be? Number 1. Okay. Future Home of the Living God by Louise Erdrich. Interesting. And one more. 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. The Just City by Jo Walton. Okay. Thank you, Bear. So here I am in my wonderful little cottage on my week-long retreat, and I'm not even halfway through, and I have 5 books to talk about already. I mean, admittedly, one of them was an audiobook that I was most of the way through before I even got on the train, and the other one, the other audiobook that I've listened to was a fairly short novella, but still, it's going pretty well. I am sorry about the weird lighting. The cottage is right next to a very busy road, and there's lots of cars going past, so there's not an awful lot I can do about that. Anyway, so the first audiobook I finished was Whispering Wood by Sharon Shin, which is the 5th in the Elemental Blessings series, and I am using to fill the Reddit fantasy bingo square of finishing a series, and I've used it as hard mode where a series has to have more than 4 books in it, and this is book 5. I was really excited when I found out that there was a book 5 because it came out in 2023, which was 8 years after book 4, and I hadn't been aware of it. But I have to say, I was a bit disappointed because it is actually my least favourite in the series, which I have listened to all of the others in the last few months and really enjoyed them again. It didn't start very well because the first person protagonist, no, it's not first person, but the main viewpoint character spends the whole of the first chapter just in her own head saying mean things about a lot of the characters that have been it up until now. And I'd never heard of her before. She's the sister of one of the characters who's been in it a lot, and we'd never come across her. So I didn't really take to her very quickly. I did like her by the end, and there was a lot of really good global politics that was continued from earlier in the series, which was really interesting. But I wasn't really a massive fan of the love interest either, and I didn't feel like the romance was given enough development to make it credible or for me to get invested in it. It definitely sets up for another potential installment, which I hope will come about, because there was some interesting stuff towards the end of this book that would be really good to explore in another one. So I guess watch this space. So the first physical book that I finished on the retreat is The Space Between Worlds by Micaiah Johnson, which is about a young woman employed by a giant corporation in a future world where technology has been discovered that can allow certain people to travel to other versions of Earth, so different realities. They can only go to the ones that are most like Earth Zero, as they call it, and they can only go there if the version of them in that world is dead. So I was expecting really pacey, exciting multiverse adventure, and it was that to a certain extent, but mostly it's a treatise on social inequality, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, because obviously the corporation is run by very rich, powerful, mostly white people, and the workers who have to go to the different realities are mostly from poor, non-white backgrounds, because they're the people who are most likely to be dead in the other versions. So there's an awful lot about that. There's also an awful lot about abuse of women by terrible men, which is fair. It's an important thing to explore, and it can make for a very compelling story. But I am getting a bit tired of it now. It comes up an awful lot in the books I read. Perhaps I'm picking the wrong books, I don't know, but there was an awful lot of that as well. The main problem that I had with this book, though, was that the author often did things that were clever, meaningful, emotionally hard-hitting, but then would explain really explicitly in the next paragraph why those things were clever, impactful, or should be emotionally hard-hitting, and that really diminished their impact, and it felt like I was being talked down to, because I got it, and it was great, and then, it didn't need to be explained. But yes, I was quite pleased with where this ended up, and overall largely enjoyed it. Next up is Sleeping Giants by Sylvain Neuvel. Oh, I should have said that Space Between Worlds is Reddit Fantasy Bingo book split into multiple parts, and Herkyard Bingo Squares, what was it? Sci-fi subgenres, many worlds, and BIPOC author. So that was what those did. Sleeping Giants, Sylvain Neuvel, is also a subgenre, so I went with mystery sci-fi, and fulfilled the last 10 years square for Herkyard of being published in 2016. And for the Reddit Fantasy Bingo, it's a mixed media book, which kind of wasn't great for me. I'm not a massive fan of mixed media narratives, and this was almost entirely interview transcripts, so very dialogue heavy, or official reports or journal entries. So I found it quite difficult to really connect with the characters, because I wasn't getting their true internal monologues in a way that you normally do in normally written narrative. But it's about a team of people who find a giant hand buried under the earth and realize that there is a disassembled massive robot that's been created by an ancient civilization on Earth thousands of years ago, and they are tasked with finding the pieces and putting it together and trying to figure out what it's for. So that was quite interesting. I really liked the interviewer character, despite the fact that he never got a name. We never really found out who he was working for or what his background was or anything, but he was quite good. Not a massive fan of the romance again, couldn't really get on board with that. It was a pretty speedy read, which is possibly damning with faint praise. I don't know. But yeah, I'm not invested enough to want to move on with the series, but I quite enjoyed it, and there were some good aspects. So if the mixed media doesn't put you off, I would probably recommend this. It was very well put together, very cleverly put together with all of the different transcripts. So yeah, pretty good overall. Next up is one that I really, really don't know how to talk about or what to feel about, which was The Just City by Jo Walton. The Fantasy Bingo Square was a book with divine characters, which is fulfilled because Apollo and Athene, the Greek gods, are in it as main characters. And for Hercules, it's for award seasons, because this was nominated for a couple of awards. And I've also gone with it for the white cover, because that's obviously pretty white. It's a weird one. It's about a group of people from all different times in history who've been brought together by Pallas Athene to try and create the just city in Plato's Republic on the island of Atlantis before it sinks as an experiment. So yeah, pretty weird. There's an awful lot of summary, there's an awful lot of telling, there's an awful lot of philosophy. The book is very much a thought experiment in the same way that Plato's Republic is, and it very much extrapolates that if you tried to put the precepts of Plato's Republic into place as a real city, it would not work. There's an awful lot that's wrong with it. But the problem I had with it was that there's an awful lot that's really interesting. There's an awful lot of really good discussion, fascinating questions raised, lots of philosophical extrapolation of stuff, which was all great. And I really liked Socrates as a character. He was very funny. And yeah, so all of that was good, but everything to do with the interrelationships and the sexual relationships and the way that the women were treated was absolutely appalling and just got worse and worse and worse. Definite content warnings for sexual violence of women and exploitation of women in this book. Really, really horrifying most of the way through, and repeated abuses, and yeah, just really bad. And whilst those things were called out towards the end as being bad, I don't think that they were called out in strong enough terms to make it really clear how terrible it was. And a lot of the female characters kind of accepted a lot of things because it was part of Plato's vision, and they felt obligated and a duty to the city that they were trying to make work. And it made me increasingly uncomfortable. So whilst I enjoyed a lot of aspects of it, and all of those things were pointed out as being bad, it just didn't really ring true for me very well. It is the first in a trilogy, and I've looked, and the third book sounds really fascinating, and I would love to read that one, but I'm not so keen on the second one, and I don't know that I'm necessarily invested enough to want to read more in this series. I also listened to The River Has Roots by Amal El-Mohtar, who I know as the co-author of This Is How You Lose the Time War, which is one of the best books I've ever read. The River Has Roots is a novella about two sisters who swear that they will stay together and in each other's lives forever. And then one of them gets involved in a relationship with a resident of Arcadia, which is basically a fairy realm, and complications ensue and things spiral out of her control. It was very much enhanced, the audiobook, with the singing and the music, which are pivotal to the story. It was very atmospheric, it was very lyrical, it was well written and quite involving. But yeah, it was maybe a bit slight, and it was again women being horribly abused by terrible men in their lives, and yeah, just a bit weary, just a bit tired of it, to be honest. But yeah, it was a pretty good story overall, and yeah, that's my first 5 books for the reading retreat, and I'm giving them all 3.5 stars. And I should say the River Havas Roots is the Reddit Fantasy Bingo Square for published in 2025. And I'm using it to cover off the Herkyard squares of gold or silver on the cover. And what's the other one? There is another one, and I can't remember what it is, but I will put it up when I've looked it up. So yes, more books to come, very much so, and I'm enjoying having Bear pick them for me. I've got some good ones coming up in the rest of the retreat. Lots more reading to come. So I will come back when I've read some more books. So one of the challenges for Herkyard, hardest reading challenge you'll ever do 2.0, is a 24-hour readathon where you try and read as many books within a day. So from when you get up to when you go to sleep, not a full 24 hours. And since I was on retreat, I thought, why not give it a go on the day when I was completely on my own in the cottage and didn't go to the big house for any of my meals. So I had a full 16 odd hours to read, and I finished 3 books. I mean, they were pretty short, to be fair, but still. So the first one was The Mimicking of Known Successes by Malka Alder, which is a murder mystery with a sapphic romance set on Jupiter. And yeah, I mostly enjoyed it. It's got good characters, it's got very good setting, all of the sci-fi aspects were very fascinating, was quite overwritten. I found myself stumbling over quite a lot of the vocabulary, and I'm not the kind of person who wants to be stopping every other page to look words up, so I just kind of let it pass over me and get things with the context. But it did feel quite dense, and the dialogue in particular was really torturous. I think one of the protagonists is potentially autistic in the way that the other protagonist talks about her reactions and in the way she sometimes responds to things. And I originally thought that her dialogue was meant to demonstrate that, but both of them had really torturous dialogue, so I'm not really sure. But yeah, overall, I quite enjoyed it. Should say, Herkyard 24-hour readathon, and also 100 to 199 pages bingo squares. And the Reddit Fantasy Bingo Square for this one was queer protagonist. So that's what that fulfills. Next up was The Non-Existent Knight and the Cloven Viscount by Italo Calvino, who I know from one of my favourite books, If on a Winter's Night, A Traveller. I didn't enjoy this as much as that. It's 2 fairly short novellas. One of them is about a knight who is actually just an empty suit of armour animated by some force, and he got his knighthood by protecting the virtue of a maiden in the woods. And then it is claimed that the maiden was not in fact a maiden, and so his knighthood is brought into question, and he has to go on a quest to try and prove that she was actually a virgin when he protected her. So obviously protecting non-virgins doesn't count. It's a parody of medieval knighthood, and it did remind me quite a lot of Chaucer and Gawain and the Green Knight, which I studied at university. And it's very clever in terms of what it's parodying, but yeah, the women don't come out of it very well, unfortunately, which I suppose is understandable, but it still wasn't great. The Cloven Viscount is about a man who is cut in half on the battlefield, and half of him goes back to his estate and does terrible things, and then the other half of him eventually turns up and is incredibly virtuous, and then there are issues around which of them should in fact be in charge, and that neither is actually going to be a good leader because they're one extreme or the other. That one was incredibly grim at the start in a lot of ways, but the female characters come out much, much better. There is a young woman the Viscount falls in love with, and I really liked her, and also his old nurse, Sebastiana, was a fantastic character, so I appreciated the women side of things a lot more in that one. So yeah, I mean, it wasn't fantastic, but it was quite funny, and I understood what it was trying to do, and it was very clever, and yeah, so this one was Knight or Paladin protagonist for the Reddit Fantasy Bingo. And for Hercules, again, it was the 24-hour readathon and also a translated work. The third book that I finished yesterday was a book of short stories called Warrior, which was edited by Antonica Akeley. It was 12 very diverse, very queer, speculative short stories, which I largely enjoyed. They were all very good, but I liked some of them more than others, which you would expect in a short story collection. My favourite one was called Glass Bones and was about a young woman from a fantasy realm who goes on a quest to find 18 rings that will allow her to go through a portal into our modern world to try and find a cure for her brother who has brittle bone disease. And I really enjoyed that one. They were all very queer in lots of different ways. They were all diverse in other ways as well. Lots of ethnic diversity and all sorts of other stuff, which was really great to read such a range of stories. And that one was Book of Short Stories for the Reddit Fantasy Bingo, and for Hercules, again, the 24-hour readathon. And I also used it because in Hercules, you can use individual short stories as separate books. And because I'm reading Les Miserables for a Hercules prompt, and that's about the same length as 7 normal-sized books, I didn't feel it was cheating too much to use 7 of the short stories in this to fulfill various of the disability prompts, various of the queer alphabet prompts, and a couple of others as well along the way. So that was very successful for one day's reading. My next main book outside of the readathon, which I started the day before the readathon and then finished this morning, was Future Home of the Living God by Louise Erdrich, which is fulfilling the parent protagonist prompt for the Reddit Fantasy Bingo, and for Hercules is representing the Indigenous Heritage Month and also the subgenres prompt for dystopian sci-fi. And this is about a young woman who is 4 months pregnant at the beginning of the book, at a time when evolution seems to have stopped or is going backwards, and that was never explained really. It was all a bit nebulous. And so women who are pregnant are collected up and controlled and confined and studied, and their babies are taken away from them because everyone's concerned about the future of humanity. She escapes capture at the beginning, gets captured, and then escapes again, and then gets captured again. So it's a bit kind of cat and mouse. It's very well written. It's very well observed, particularly to begin with. It was quite funny. I really enjoyed the voice of the narrator. Does have one of my main pet peeves because the whole book is her meant to be writing a diary, an account of all of this happening for her unborn child. And nobody in reports, diaries, whatever, writes direct action scenes and fully reported dialogue conversations. It just doesn't happen. But getting past that as a main pet peeve of mine, was really good. I did think it dragged a bit. There were times when she was holed up in our house or captured and confined in a hospital or a prison, and there wasn't much going on. And it was very indicative of what was happening to her because she didn't know what was going on and she didn't have much contact with other people for various reasons. But it did feel as if it was a bit dragged out as it went along. Didn't end where I was expecting it to either. And I think, yeah, I literally finished it about 5 minutes ago, so still not quite sure how I feel about it. But I think overall, the conclusion, whilst unexpected, was not bad, and I didn't feel cheated by it. But yeah, not particularly jolly book in a lot of ways. But anyway, enjoyed it. So that's my next 4, and much like the rest of the books that I have reviewed so far on this retreat, they're all getting 3.5 stars. So it's very much a 3.5 star week so far. So now I guess I need some more books to read. So there, we're going to have to go back to the pile and the dice and pick some more. Okay, so here we are again, Bear. Let's see what is in store for me next. So only 6 books left. Getting through them. Ooh. 6. Oh, yeah, it happened. That's mine. The Defiant Spark. I'm really going to do it. Read my own book. Why not? Okay. So, next. 6 again. Can't have 6 again. Just pick 6. Really keen for me to read my own book, aren't you, Bear? Oh, that one's gone on the floor. Come on. Failing in your duties, honestly. 2. The Imaginary Corpse. Excellent. That was one of the ones that I was particularly keen to read this week. The Imaginary Corpse by Tyler Hayes. In a world where Toy Story meets Sin City, a dinosaur detective battles his own trauma and a remorseless serial killer hell-bent on shaking up an already messed up town. Sounds very weird, but quite a lot of fun. Okay, those are the next 2. Thanks, Bear. Okay, Bear, there's only 4 books left. But I think we need another couple of rolls just to see us through the week and on the journey home. It's only 4, but let's use the D8 because it's going to be easier for you to roll it. Come on, final books of the reading retreat. Oh, that's the one I've been avoiding. Chaos Vector. It's book 2 in a series by Megan O'Keefe. I don't really remember a huge amount about book 1, but okay, I've got to read it at some point to finish the challenge, so might as well launch in at the end of a reading retreat. Okay. Right, one more. Yay! And that was the one I wanted. So, good combo. In the Shadow Garden, Liz Parker, something about witches, bit cozy. Perfect. Well done, Bear. And these two will have to come back home and find a place in another schedule another day. So, here we are again for some new reviews. So the next book that I finished is The Imaginary Corpse by Tyler Hayes, and oof is all I can say. This one really hit hard. It's about a world where abandoned ideas and outgrown imaginary friends end up when their creators let go of them for whatever reason. And it's basically designed entirely to traumatize me because I am very connected to stuffed animals and I anthropomorphize them a little bit too much. And the protagonist of this is a plushy triceratops named Tippy, who is a private detective, and he gets involved in trying to figure out how a new idea in the still reel, which is what the realm is called, is actually managing to permanently kill his friends. And it is incredibly well realized. Everything about the world building is phenomenal. All of the reactions of the characters and the way they talk and the concepts that they think about are very well thought through in terms of how imaginary friends and manifested ideas would react to things. And yeah, it's rough. I mean, there's a lot of trauma for the characters and also for me reading it, because they have been abandoned by their creators, and yeah, really hit me hard. I wasn't wholly satisfied with the ending, although since I finished it, I've been thinking about it more. It really made me cry a lot. And yeah, I think maybe it was not quite as good as I wanted it to be, but it was a satisfying ending. I was very impressed with how the author made me feel sympathy for the bad guy, as well as the incredible range of different characters that were involved. Found family vibes up the wazoo. Yeah, really fantastic. I'm giving this one 4.5 stars. Really good book, but a tough read in a lot of ways. And next, yes, I read my own book, The Defiant Spark. I should say, Imaginary Corpse was the Reddit fantasy bingo square for Impossible Places, so that definitely fit that. I also used it for the Herkyard prompts of a standalone for the series Staircase, and also, nope, can't remember what the other one was, but I will put it up here when I have looked it up. The Defiant Spark by me Annie Persick. Here you go. If you want to buy it, it is available. This was the Reddit Fantasy Bingo Square for a self-published novel, and it also completes hard mode for a self-published book, which has fewer than 100 ratings on Goodreads. So, you know, if you want to make it ineligible for the square another time, then do feel free to read it and rate it. Anyway, I also decided I was going to annotate as I was reading, which I've never really done before. But it didn't, I don't know, it slowed me down a lot, and I don't really see the point. So I have some little color tags, but I didn't carry on with it. Anyway, The Defiant Spark is set in a world where a very small number of people, the artisans, control the energy force mana which powers everyone's technology. But it all runs on magic. The mana is a magic power rather than electricity. And our plucky hero Abelard gets involved in the artisan world when an accident gives him artisan powers, and then he starts to discover that things are not as he has been led to believe for most of his life, and he has to decide whether to try and go against the system or just accept his new status within it. I enjoyed this more than I expected to. I thought it might be a bit cringy, rereading my own debut novel from a few years ago. But yeah, I think it's actually pretty fun. It's not high literary art, I'm not claiming that at all. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. It's pacey. I really liked the characters that I created. Probably shouldn't go on about it too much, but I think it's a good fun ride. Yeah, entertaining read. I'm giving it 3.5 stars. Then we had a couple of slight issues. I had Chaos Vector, Megan O'Keefe, which is the second in the Protectorate series, and it's just been too long since I read the first one, and this is a chunky, hard sci-fi series. I did try and look up the details of the first one going into reading this. But yeah, it was just too much information that I had forgotten, too many characters that I couldn't remember, too many plot points that I didn't get the significance of, and I just kind of gave up. This is not the book's fault or the author's fault or the series' fault. It's just me having left it too long. So unfortunately, this one was a DNF. And then I went on to the Wind-Up Girl, and I had to give up on this one as well, unfortunately. Too dreary, too unpleasant. I didn't like most of the viewpoint protagonists. It's set in a world where things have been very much destroyed by climate change and new diseases that are affecting crops in particular. It's set in Bangkok. There's an awful lot of oppression, a lot of racism, mistreatment of people and animals, and the wind-up girl of the title, who is a genetically engineered sex toy, essentially. The opening section of her narrative, where she is horribly abused in very explicit manner. I'm hoping that by the end of the book she escapes and goes on to a better life, but I didn't want to read it to find out. It was just too unpleasant. It was very well written in terms of the immersion and the descriptions and the density of the world building. But yeah, just not for me, unfortunately. So I have most of the last day of the retreat left and the journey home tomorrow, during which I am not going to read the book that the next book that Bear picked for me, which was In the Shadow Garden by Liz Parker. I am instead going to move on to Frey by Rowena Miller, because in terms of the time that I have left, it's going to fit better. And yeah, this is the second in a series which I started a little while ago, and I remember better than the Protectorate series by Megan O'Keefe. And it's a fantasy book about a young woman who makes clothing and gets embroiled in the politics of the world. And I'm looking forward to reading this one, and I will put up a brief review and star rating here for after I have finished it, because I want to finish filming while I am still away rather than leaving it until I get home. So I am expecting to enjoy this because I really liked the first one, and I'm glad to be moving on with the series. It's fulfilling the Reddit fantasy bingo square of a book where the protagonist is involved in the textiles industry and making clothes, so that definitely fits. And I think I've got to find a couple of squares for it to fit on Herkyard, because I haven't assigned it squares for that, but I will do that as well, and also put that information up here. So yeah, that's my reviews finished for this retreat. So it has been quite a week of reading, and look what my friends Cressy and Sarah got me for completing 21 reading retreats with them, which is really awesome and very lovely of them. And here is my stack of books that I have completed. So, well, this one I will finish on the way home, and these two unfortunately were DNFs. So I'm going to have to find replacement books to fulfill their prompts. But my plan was to complete as many Reddit Fantasy Bingo squares as possible in a week. And I have completed 12, which is more than I expected. And I have also wound in the Herkyard Hardest Reading Challenge You'll Ever Do 2.0 requirements, which I did not know was even a thing when I planned my reading retreat. But I've also completed, once I have finished this last book, 28 of the squares on that bingo board. So that is an excellent start, even before the official challenge begins, because it doesn't officially begin until the 7th of July. But I'm not cheating, because you are allowed to start early as long as you finish early. So I started on the 27th of June, which was the first day of my retreat, because I thought, why waste the opportunity when I'm going to be reading tons of books? So as long as I complete the challenge before the end of the 26th of July next year, it will still be eligible. So I didn't actually completely stick to your selections, did I, Bear? Because you picked In the Shadow Garden for me to read in the last selection. But because of the DNFs and the amount of time I have left, Frey by Rowena Miller is going to fit better with the remaining time than this one, because this one's going to be too short and I haven't got time to read both. So this one's going to go back on the TBR pile for me to read another time. And yeah, best reading retreat week ever, and very happy with what I have achieved. So thank you for joining me on this lovely adventure that I have gone on with my reading, and I will see you again in another video very soon. Bye for now.